Welcome here, friends. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to be talking about literary analysis and the literary analysis journey. So the first question that I want to answer is something that parents ask me on a regular basis. I get questions often in my email or in my messenger, just questions about language arts, and you are, of course, more than welcome to send me questions as well, and I will be more than happy to send back an answer to you. And, maybe someday do a video on it as well. But parents ask me, I don't really get literary analysis. Does it really matter? What difference does it make if they can understand metaphors and similes and what all those words are? Does that really matter? And do they really need that in their lives? So generally speaking, I don't teach anything that doesn't matter in the real world. And I tell my students that I will never, ever give them an assignment that's a waste of time. So if I'm teaching literary analysis, I truly believe that it matters. So the first question I'm going to answer today is, why bother teaching literary analysis anyway? Isn't this just digging into something that doesn't matter? I know I've talked to people who feel that we are looking for meaning in books that just really aren't there. Well, then I think we're reading the wrong types of books. Every piece of literature that is well written is going to have underlining meanings, and the author has done it intentionally and left these little clues along the way for us to pick up. The best movies, the best books are the ones that have more meaning to them. And maybe we don't always catch it the first time around. Maybe we're just reading for the story or watching for pleasure. But books and movies that have underlying themes and messages are really, really important to read and to watch. And the reason it's so important is because in our lives, we are always being inundated with content. So it's not just the books and movies, it's the music, it's the news media, it's the political debates, it's teachers in classes in post-secondary school, it's friends that we meet here and there and we discuss different topics with them. So it's really, really important that students are able to think on a more deep level, to see the techniques that authors have used and what effects that they have created and how they've done that. Because people who are in marketing and people who are in politics and, even just people who just have beliefs different than us, they use these same techniques to try to convince us. So that's one very, very important reason is literary analysis improves our critical thinking skills. It helps us to look for fallacies. It helps us to look for underlying meanings. What do you really mean by that? And it should lead us to be asking questions. So it's very important that we don't allow ourselves to be manipulated. And one of the ways we can do that is by learning literary analysis. So the second reason that literary analysis is so important is because as students begin to read, they read for plot. And part of this is because early readers and the first books that we give our students that are so simple to read, they really are nothing but plot. And then as students get older, we give them more and more complex literature, and if they never move from the form, the plot, the things that are happening, who is doing what, when, where, why, how, if they never move from that to looking at the meaning of that, then they are going to be held back in their higher level reading. So it's very important that students learn these skills and are able to move from just reading for plot to reading for meaning. And this happens very, very often, not until late middle school and early high school, but you don't have to wait that long. So that is the second question that I want to answer today. I want to talk to you about the journey. When do you introduce literary analysis to your student? And how do you do that? And what does it look like at different ages and stages? So I want to share some of the things that I did with my students as they were growing. And I kind of happened across one of the first things just by accident. We were in a restaurant and we were waiting for our meal. And of course, my kids were like over hungry and overtired because we had just driven 12 hours into the city. And so they were antsy and kind of irritable. So I was trying to distract them. And there was this picture on the wall. And I said, "What do you see in that picture? What do you think that picture means?" And my son right away is like, "It's just a picture of a house. Whatever, it's just a house." I said, "Oh, is it just a house? Why do you think the painter chose those colors for the inside of the house when he chose such bright, sunny colors on the outside of the house? What might that mean?" And so we began talking about artwork. And we were able to say, well, we don't really know what the painter was looking for when he painted that picture, but it sure seems that the inside of the house isn't a very happy place to be when all the happiness is outside. But we see that the sun is shining in the window, and it's shining in the window onto the table, onto a book. Oh, well, maybe that book is that person's happy place. So we got to discuss and look at possible meanings, go a little bit deeper. This is what we're looking for. We want students to just think. So we can start this as early as preschool and kindergarten. When we're reading picture books, not every picture book is going to have something that you can talk about, of course. Many of them are just oversimplistic, not very well written. But if you find some really well written picture books, you can discuss those pictures. Talk about the colors, because the colors are things that are going to really stand out to our young people, and they can, think about what that color feels like to them. So it's much easier for them to understand. We can ask things like, "I wonder why all of the colors are gray and brown except the red ball. I wonder what that would mean. Why is the ball red? What makes the ball special?" And so we can guide them in thinking a little bit deeper. We can ask them how the colors make them feel. We can ask them what they like about the picture, what the picture might mean to them, if that's a picture that they would want to copy. It's always good to have our young people copy it. Maybe we can draw the outlines and we can ask them to color the same picture but do it in different colors, and talk about how does it make it feel different if it's different colors. Early elementary school, so maybe kindergarten to grade 3, we would continue with picture books, more complex picture books. So ones that have more words, more detailed pictures. One example of that, I brought a couple books today. I don't have any early picture books anymore hanging around my house, but this is a great one, and I don't know if it's going to be reversed for you. It's The Quilt Maker's Gift. And this book has lovely pictures throughout it. And a beautiful story with an amazing message about giving and greed. And the message isn't hidden. It's very clear. But that's going to make it easier for your young person to find it. So when you read it, you can ask them at the end, what do you think the message of that book is? What do you think the author's trying to teach you as a reader? So, and then go back and look for how you can prove that. So a couple of things that I might do with this book is I might show them this page. So in this page, if you look down in this corner here, you see the greedy king. And the greedy king has his list of all of the beautiful things that he owns. and he has sent his servants out everywhere in the land to find something else beautiful that he can receive as a gift, because he is not happy. He has all of these things, but he's not happy. So we can look at all of the beautiful pictures, and they may spend a long time looking at these pictures. So you do not want to rush when you read books like this. Ask them about the colors. This page is so interesting. It is jam-packed with amazing toys and inventions and all sorts of things. Bright colors and gold and red and blue and yellow. And there's cakes and unicorns and toys, pictures, so many things. But the king's not happy. But the colors sure feel happy on that page. Maybe we could ask why the author might have put all those happy colors on a page with a king who is so sad. Perhaps he's so surrounded by all those happy things, yet he's still sad. And that's why he is laying underneath them all. And so we can talk about how we can have all these things, but they won't fulfill us. The author has chosen, actively chosen, to put bright colors on here and to pack the page, because that's how the king's whole castle is. Every corner, every drawer is packed with things, and things that should make him happy. And it's interesting on this page, the words, because the words on this page are in rhyme, and this is one of the very few times in this entire book that it's in rhyme. And it says, things that shimmered and glittered and glowed, things whimsical and practical, things mysterious and magical, so many, many things that the king kept a list of all the lists of things he owned. He doesn't just have so many things, he has lists of things he owns. It is a beautifully crafted 5 lines there on that page, and it's so much fun to read. Why might the author have put such a fun passage to read on a page with a king that isn't happy? So those might be some questions we might ask. And so I would answer that question if my student was struggling, and I would say, oh, I think it's because we can enjoy the words on that page, even though the king can't. That there's so many things to enjoy. We can't enjoy the balloons and the toys that are there because it's just a picture, but we can enjoy those words. And there are so many things that we can enjoy in life. So that's something that I might look at for a book that has really detailed pictures. I would continue to use art discovery, continue the discussions that we had in preschool and kindergarten, ask the same types of questions, or have your student ask you questions. If they can teach it, they've learned it. This is also a great time in early elementary when you're watching movies to point things out. Oh, did you hear that? Oh, did you see that? Oh, what an amazing line. Oh, did you hear that? Do you think that's really true that he could eat how many eggs could he eat in that movie? I think it's 8 dozen eggs. So could he really eat 8 dozen eggs? No, that's hyperbole. And we can start giving them those words. Exaggeration for effect is hyperbole. We can talk about comparisons of things. You will see in children's movies, many of the best children's movies, you will see all of the same things that you see in literature. The Incredibles is an amazing movie that has so many images in it. It is a story about family. It's a story about giftings. It's a story about believing in yourself. There's so many pieces, so many meanings, so many themes in that movie. So go ahead and learn some of those literary terms and start to teach them to your young person. Maybe you're not sure how to do that, and that's okay. It's okay to go and just Google on YouTube and, literary analysis terms, and it's going to pop up lessons for you. There's so much there, so much there. All right, so we are not done when we come to early elementary. In late elementary school, we're going to continue with those movie discussions. We might look deeper into them. We might be asking questions like, well, what's that symbol? Why does that object keep coming up again and again in this movie? And what do you think it means? It's interesting, if you watch a movie that's based in a different culture, you'll be able to talk perhaps about the different meanings of symbols. So the color white is purity for North Americans. It is considered the color of death for Asian people. So you really have to consider what those different colors mean. It is such a great time to introduce illusion and allegory. By the time they're in grade 4, 5, 6, they are able to begin to understand allegory, begin to understand that one story can be a stand-in for another story. If you haven't yet read The Lord of the Rings, if you haven't read Pilgrim's Progress, these are metaphorical or allegorical books, and it's a great time to introduce those. To do read-alouds, to read the books aloud and talk about it. We want our young people to be independent, and so often we very quickly send them to just read independently. You can read, just go read it and we'll talk about it. Or even worse, just go read it and then you can write a paragraph about what you learned. They're going to write the plot. Okay? Writing a book report about what happened in a book is not effective. Schools do that because they want to see if the student read the book. I mean, it does practice sentence structure, it does practice paragraph structure, but it really doesn't help them to understand the meanings of the book. They're going to fall back on the pieces that they actually understand, and that's going to be plot, the parts that they feel confident with. Throughout middle school, you're going to continue with literature reading, read-alouds, continue the read-alouds if you can, discuss interesting parts, intriguing parts. Why would the author write it that way? Why would they say it that way? Why would they do it that way? I wonder why there's a storm coming now. Do you think that tells us about something in the story? Or maybe it's been stormy, but the writer comments that the sun is breaking through the clouds. This is our opportunity to show them the ways that authors create mood and foreshadow and all sorts of things like that. It's a great time in middle school for them to begin to read deeper and to ask themselves always, why would the author do that? Because the author usually has a reason. They don't just randomly write things and, throw it out there into the world. They have considered what they're writing. They have chosen what the weather is. They have chosen what the season is. They have chosen what the character is wearing. They have chosen what that storefront looks like. Those things all tell us something. And we can learn a lot just by reading it very, very carefully. This is also a great time to ask students to go back and read detailed picture books again. Have them tell you the underlying meanings and themes. And we don't think to give picture books to middle school students, but you would be surprised how much meaning they can draw from a picture book, but they wouldn't have gone and looked at it if you hadn't suggested it. So I want to show you a book that we're reading in middle school language arts right now. It is On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness by Andrew Peterson. And so I just want to talk about a section there and some of the things that my students are looking for. So this is on page 9, of On the Edge of the Dark Sea of Darkness. It's no wonder that Janner had a hard time sleeping once he heard the faint thud of hooves and the jangle of chains. He could see in his mind the forms of crows circling the carriage and perched atop it, hear the croaking beaks and the flapping of black wings. He told himself that the sounds were only his imagination, but he knew that somewhere in the countryside that very night the black carriage would stop at some poor soul's house, and the children there would be taken away, never to be seen again. This sounds like this is a horrible and dark book. It's not. It's a beautiful, wonderful book. This is a very short passage, and it is about the evil in their land. So, without even knowing what comes before, without even being told about this carriage, or without reading the poem about the carriage, or knowing anything, because I'm assuming that you haven't read the book. Perhaps you have. If you have, you know it's a lovely book. Without even knowing any of those things, you already know something about this carriage. So if we were here together and you could share with me, I would be asking you, what about the jangle of chains? What about the crows? What do crows stand for? Croaking beaks and flapping black wings. He knew that somewhere in the countryside that very night, the black carriage would stop at some poor soul's house, and the children there would be taken away, never to be seen again. This evil wants children. And it comes at night. It comes with black crows. These are all symbols of death and evil. These are symbols that, your student doesn't need to be taught that crows are a symbol of death. It's all right there. Right? There are more descriptions of this carriage, but if you look in the book, they also have an illustration there of the carriage itself. So we have a pair of black horses. We have it being driven by the creatures that are ruling in the land. Well, at least the underlings that are ruling in the land. And so this is something that every student can understand. They can recognize these symbols. They don't even have to be told, but they do have to think about them. Otherwise, they're going to read this and they're going to say, yep, the black carriage came, had 2 black horses, had chains, came to take away children. That's the plot. But below that plot, the description tells them so much more. It tells them about the fear. It tells them about the anxiety. He said that he tried to tell himself that it was only his imagination. It wasn't his imagination. So I would recommend books that have images very clear in them in middle school, images that are very difficult to miss. And that's a great way for students to be able to see those themes and those symbols, those ideas. Also in middle school, separate out reading comprehension learning from literary analysis. When we do literary analysis, we want to make sure that we're reading below the student's reading level so that they're not struggling to figure out what the plot is, but they're able to understand the plot easily, and then they'll be able to focus their mind on other things. So if you should be wanting to improve your students' reading comprehension and challenge them with difficult reading, but the time to do that is not when you're expecting literary analysis. The time to do that is separate from that. As your student gets into high school, I want to encourage you to read classic literature. Classic literature writes at a higher level, a level that is very rarely seen in our culture or our media, which writes, I was told grade 5 years ago, but I suspect that it has fallen below grade 5 level. Most media outlets, most magazines are have very low reading levels so that everybody can understand them. So it's easy to read. We wouldn't want to make it difficult because then people will click off and go somewhere else. One of the books from high school that I love to do literary analysis with is A Tale of Two Cities. And it is a very high reading level. It is very difficult. So my high school students do struggle separating the plot from the literary analysis. But we just continue to work very hard on the literary analysis piece. Ideally, they would read it twice. So the first time for the plot, the second time for literary analysis. But that's a hard sell to a high school student to read a difficult book twice, especially one that they may not have really loved the first time around. I can be very honest and say the first time, second time, I read A Tale of Two Cities, I did not love it. It's quickly become one of my favorites, but I've probably read it 6 to 8 times now. And so every time I read it, I see more and more in it. I just want to take a section of that and I'll show you how we do this in high school. This is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens, and in the Dover edition, it's page 77. The raindrops are still falling, large, heavy, and few, said Dr. Manette. It comes slowly. It comes surely, said Carleton. They spoke low, as people watching and waiting mostly do, as people in a dark room, watching and waiting for lightning, always do. There was a great hurry in the streets of people speeding away to get shelter before the storm broke. The wonderful corner for echoes resounded with the echoes of footsteps coming and going, yet not a footstep was there. A multitude of people, and yet a solitude, said Darnay, when they had listened for a while. Is it not impressive, Mr. Darnay? Asked Lucy. Sometimes I have sat here of an evening, until I have fancied, but even the shade of a foolish fancy makes me shudder tonight. When all is so black and solemn, let us shudder too. We may know what it is. It will seem nothing to you. Such whims are only impressive as we originate them, I think. They are not to be communicated. I have sometimes sat alone here of an evening listening until I have made the echoes out to be the echoes of all the footsteps that are coming by and by into our lives. There is a great crowd coming one day into our lives, if that be so, Sidney Carton struck in his moody way. So this is the beginning of a longer passage. And so we would talk about this in the class. This is one of the pivotal passages in this book, in my opinion. The raindrops are still falling, large, heavy, and few. What does that signify? We have the beginning of a storm happening. It's going to be a big storm. We have heavy raindrops, and they're just beginning. It comes slowly. And Carton says it comes surely. They're not actually talking about the rain in this passage. They're talking about political events that are about to begin. So they stay and they're watching and waiting, just like people do watching for the lightning. Thunder doesn't hurt anything, but lightning can destroy. So lightning is really important. And it's interesting that you can't see, but in the book, lightning is capitalized. So now we have lightning being personified. I wonder what the lightning could be. So lightning is going to be the revolution. The next part is very interesting because it brings up this theme and this symbol of footsteps. There was a great hurry in the streets, people speeding away to get shelter. That's very natural. It's starting to rain, people are rushing to get shelter, and then it says, yet not a footstep was there. A multitude of people, and yet a solitude, said Darnay. And as we go on, we see that Lucy says that she often sits there in the evening and she hears the echoes, and she believes them to be echoes of all the footsteps coming by and by into our lives. So there are going to be so many footsteps come into their lives. This is a foreshadow. This is a theme throughout the book, symbol in the book. It's right throughout the book about footsteps. We have the doctor pacing to and fro. There are footsteps that happen so many times throughout this book. And if you're looking for them, you're going to see them. Footsteps are a symbol of people entering their lives and people exiting their lives. So as we read in high school, we're reading more difficult literature, so it is more difficult to do literary analysis. Ideally, they will have improved their reading level, so it's not so difficult. But reading the classics is very, very important. They are chock full of themes and symbols and ideas and foreshadow and imagery, sensory imagery in the description. These books were written in a time when people really wrote. They wrote on a much deeper level than most authors do today. There are many modern pieces of literature as well, but these old classics are books that very often are unrivaled in our culture now. Also, it's important to train in reading for context. So what's happening in the real world at the time the book is set? So in Tale of Two Cities, this is pre and during the French Revolution. What else has happened? What do they know about the French Revolution? You really are going to miss out a lot in this book if you don't know about the French Revolution. What caused it? What brought it on? What happened in it? You don't need a huge amount of knowledge to understand the book, but it's really important to know the context of the real world. As well, to be able to read the subtext. So the subtext is what's written in between the lines. So what is the story saying without saying it? This is also a time when it's important to teach different styles of analysis. So today I've basically taught traditional academic analysis, but there are so many different theories for literary analysis. So you can check out, there's postmodern, there's Marxist, there's feminist, there's post-colonial, there's so many ways to look at a book. And you just are looking at the book through the eyes or through the lens of that particular analysis style. So for instance, if it is feminist, you will be looking at the book and you will be seeing, well, what is the role of women in this book? And what injustices are there? And what power do women have in this book? If it is Marxist, you're going to be looking to see where the power is held. You're going to be seeing who has the power and who is being controlled, and who the product is, what the product is that is being produced in that book. It may not be entirely obvious depending on the book. If you're looking to do a Marxist analysis, I recommend The Metamorphosis, because it is actually a short story that responds to Marxism in that period. So that is a good place. You need to look at a book through the lens of the time and the period when it was written. So that's something that's very helpful. Also in high school, we learn to write a literary analysis essay, and that is just another kind of persuasive essay. But you're proving what the theme is, what the symbols are, and show how the author did that in the book. I have a great resource for you. It is the Literary Analysis Journey. And if you would like a copy of that, there will be a link in the description that you can just click on and make a copy and have it laid out for you what to do at different ages and stages. And I would love to answer your questions. So please reach out and in the comments, let me know what your questions are, or email me at support@discerntolearn.com. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I can't wait to talk to you next time.